If you were to hop into your car and drive westward today, you'll drive by thousands of McDonald's and depressing towns. But if you jumped on your horse and buggy and rode westward in the 1700s, your experience would be much different. Today, we're talking about the American frontier and life during westward expansion. Some viewers might ask, you haven't released a video in over 3 months. Why are you coming back now? Well, I saw these paintings and I fell in love. I mean, these paintings make me want to get in a little house and move down the prairie, you know what I mean? Sure, there was racism, like a lot of racism, like astronomical amounts of racism. And sure, if I accidentally got a stray leaf in my mouth, I would die of cholera or something. And sure, if I looked at the wrong guy in the saloon, I would get shot. But if we look over all of that, I wouldn't mind living in the Wild West. I mean, I see these paintings and I want to ban all cars, stop throwing waste in the ocean, and maybe ask for like a third of the population to die out, just so we can see nature like this again. And if you say nature like that is still around, my friend, it's not the same. The aesthetic is off. Now, bear in mind, I'm saying this before researching anything about the time period. Anyway, let's roll the intro. To talk about life on the American frontier, we first have to define what it is. So, technically, the American frontier spanned from 1607, when the first colony was established at Jamestown, to 1912, when Arizona was admitted as a state. But the actual interesting period was from 1865, the end of the Civil War, to 1890, the closing of the frontier, which is a period known as the archetypal Old West. The 1600s to really 1800 was really just about setting up the 13 colonies and fighting for independence. Westward expansion wasn't a priority. Some of my smarter viewers might remember these dates and notice that they sound pretty close to the dates of the Gilded Age, as I discussed in this old video. This is interesting. In the East, during this time period, there were strong established communities and societies with a lot of money, and in the West it was the opposite. The people in the East were building the railroads, and the people in the West were searching for their American dream. Pretty interesting. This period consisted of the Gold Rush, the Oregon Trail, Cowboys, and all that jazz. But let's talk about where one would actually expand westward to. So, if you're not American, you might think that cowboys were in the South, in Alabama and Mississippi, but they were actually in California, New Mexico, Texas, and other western states. It's states like these where you'd find trails going westward, the Great Plains, canyons, and wagon trains. So, what was life like as a child, woman, and man on the frontier? In 1862, Abraham Lincoln passed the Homestead Act, which practically gave people 160 acres of land as long as they lived on the land and improved upon it. Because of this, many pioneers became farmers. Those with children made those children work hard. They would help tend the animals and farm. Some children would learn in a one-room schoolhouse, but overall life in the rural West was very carefree and created self-sufficient kids and a sense of independence. Now, some historians who aren't any fun highlight the abuse and loneliness children face on the frontier. Now, it's also possible that a kid becomes an outlaw, like Billy the Kid. Everyone's heard of him, the teenage outlaw who was orphaned at 15 and then just became a menace. But this outcome is just as plausible for a child living on the frontier. If you want to learn more about childhood during this time, I really suggest reading The Adventures of Huck Finn or The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Even though they are based in Mississippi, they were both released in the late 1800s and really represent a carefree childhood. They're great books and you should read them. Next, we have women on the American frontier. Like the children, the woman would work on a farm if the family got a farm somewhere out in the West. But as time passed, women began to work increasingly inside the house due to the creation of a washing machine and sewing machines. But they had more job opportunities than that, such as being prostitutes. This is true. If you've ever watched a Western, whenever the hero walks into a saloon or whatever, there'll always be some women on the second floor. Those are prostitutes. However, a lot of women didn't go willingly. Many Chinese women, for example, were sold off by their families. However, women also became cowgirls. Now, being a cowgirl doesn't mean going Clint Eastwood on everyone. That's a lie curated by Hollywood. Cowgirls and cowboys really just herded cattle and took care of their ranch. But there were women gunslingers as well, and bounty hunters, and many women were business owners. In fact, out in the West, white women were allowed to vote, unlike in the East. They were very liberal in the West. Minority women, however, had much less freedom. And finally, a man on the American frontier. So, a man could be a cowboy, which actually sucked. A man could be a miner, either a gold prospector during the gold rush, or they could work in a mine shaft and live in a mining town. Men could become farmers, which was actually a pretty dangerous occupation. I mean, there were big constant range wars and feuds over whose cattle could graze where. Men could join a gang and rob banks or trains. They could become loggers. They could also become business owners in a town or a city. A man could also become a lawman, or even a bounty hunter. Finally, a man could become a frontiersman, like Lewis and Clark. Overall, the jobs you could get on the American frontier sucked, and were so labor intensive. Life was pretty bad, I'll be honest. The food was pretty boring. You were mostly just eating beans and bacon and other small animals you could find. You'd probably get shot or die from dysentery, especially since the average lifetime was 39 years old in 1860, and that was probably skewed because life in the East was so much better. But damn, these paintings still suck me in. Before I finish this video, I believe that it's important to discuss European and later America's treatment of the Native Americans. We came into the land, indirectly killed off tens of millions by infecting them with diseases that their bodies weren't used to, and later they were forced into small reservations and were massacred by Americans. Truly a stain on America's history. A couple of days ago was Columbus Day, and I believe that it's a good thing that some places are changing to Indigenous Peoples Day and looking at America through a different historical perspective. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Drop a sub or a comment or a like, send the video to your friends, give me some more ideas. Until next time, I'm Urban Encyclopedia, and thank you for watching.